Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you join us to learn more about the Stevens Initiative Award Competition. I'm Maysam Ali, Assistant Director of the Stevens Initiative, joined here by the Stevens Initiative team, Christine Chow, Henry Shepard, and Andy Schaefer. First, I wanted to give you an overview of the call, some housekeeping notes, and briefly introduce the initiative before passing it along to my colleague, who will lead us through the presentation. The goal of this webinar is to offer guidance on important financial and compliance regulations that may be helpful to you as you put together your applications. If you have programmatic, substantive, logistical, or other questions, you're welcome to email us at stevensinitiative@aspeninstitute.org. This webinar will run for an hour, during which participants will be muted, and Christine Chow, our Finance and Compliance Manager, will go through the slideshow we have prepared for you and emailed you prior to the call. After that, we will conduct a 15-minute Q&A, and we will be taking questions through the Questions tab on the bottom right corner of your screen, not the chat box. We will get to as many questions as we can and respond to the rest by email, so please also include your email when submitting a question. We will record this session and post it on our website, www.stevensinitiative.org, for those who cannot attend or need to leave early. If you have any questions or have problems hearing us, please email us at stevensinitiative@aspeninstitute.org. All those invited to join this call have submitted letters of interest to the Stevens Initiative and have been selected to proceed to the second round of the competition and submit applications for funding. As such, you may be well familiar with the Stevens Initiative, but I will go ahead and share a very brief overview. The Stevens Initiative is an international effort to build global competence for young people in the United States, the Middle East, and North Africa by growing and enhancing the field of virtual exchange, i.e., online, international, and collaborative learning. The initiative aims to improve young people's global competence, consistent with the Department of Education framework, which includes collaboration, communication, language skills, awareness of diverse perspectives, and civic and global engagement. The initiative advocates for virtual exchange as a means to achieve this goal. The initiative is supported by the U.S. Department of State, the Bezos Family Foundation, the governments of the United Arab Emirates and Morocco, in addition to several technology firms which have provided valuable in-kind resources to help deliver and enhance those programs. We invite you to learn more about the initiative and the competition at www.stevensinitiative.org. With that, I will now ask my colleague Christine to introduce herself and take us through the presentation for today.
Thank you, Maysam, and hello, everyone. I'm Christine Chow, the Finance and Compliance Manager of the Stevens Initiative. It's great to be here with you today and walk you through the presentation we've put together on budget and federal compliance. As Maysam stated, the Aspen Institute Stevens Initiative is a recipient of U.S. federal funds and is required to adhere to federal regulations. These regulations are set forth by the Office of Management and Budget, also known as OMB, one of the agencies of the executive branch of the U.S. government. The OMB established a set of comprehensive regulations for grants and agreements called the Uniform Guidance. The Uniform Guidance is at times referred to as the Omni or Super Circular. The specific sections that are relevant to the Stevens Initiative are Sections 2 CFR Part 200 and 2 CFR Part 600. We could spend weeks discussing the Uniform Guidance and the nuances and complexities that exist within these guidelines. But this webinar today is intended to give you a brief overview on federal compliance and highlight some of the key requirements that you should keep in mind as you are developing the budget. In addition to 2 CFR 200 and 2 CFR 600, we must also adhere to the terms and conditions listed in the Prime Award Agreement. The Prime Award Agreement is the agreement that exists between the Aspen Institute Stevens Initiative and the Department of State, and is a mechanism by which we are allowed to run this competition and to give funding out. If your project is selected and you choose to accept the award, you will become a subrecipient to the Aspen Institute Stevens Initiative, and the federal regulations referenced above and the terms and conditions listed in the Prime Award Agreement will flow down to the subaward agreement you will receive as a subrecipient. So you've heard me mention the word subrecipient a few times. The term subrecipient is a very technical term from the Uniform Guidance, which defines the subrecipient as a non-federal entity that receives a subaward from a pass-through entity. We'll talk a little bit more about a pass-through entity in the next slide. At times, you may hear the Stevens Initiative refer to subrecipients as awardees, subawardees, or even grantees. You will not, however, hear us refer to subrecipients as contractors. The nature between these two terms are quite different, and the implications of being a subrecipient carry reporting and compliance requirements not imposed on contractors. The chart included in this slide provides some common characteristics of a subrecipient compared to a contractor. This chart can easily be turned into a checklist that can be used to help you make your own determinations as to what constitutes a contractor or subrecipient when completing your budget. A defining quality of a subrecipient is that it performs a part of the program's activities, while a contractor provides goods or services in support of program activities. That being said, it is a little easier to understand that if your project is selected, why your entity would be considered a subrecipient rather than a contractor. The expected roles and responsibilities as a subrecipient will be clearly outlined in the subaward agreement and will also include the activities approved in your full application if you are selected as a winner. As I mentioned just a little bit ago in the next slide, we will talk a little bit more about pass-through entities. The Uniform Guidance defines a pass-through entity as a non-federal entity that provides a subaward to a subrecipient to carry out a part of a federal award. The Aspen Institute is the pass-through entity. As a pass-through entity, it is our responsibility to conduct continued risk assessments of the subrecipient and monitor the subrecipient. Monitoring can take the form of reviewing reports, verifying that the subrecipient has had audits, addressing non-compliance issues, and performing on-site visits or desk reviews. The full list of requirements can be found at 2 CFR 200.331, and I highly encourage you to review and become familiar with these requirements as well. The next slide is just a quick summary of the two slides we just discussed. Again, the pass-through entity is the Aspen Institute. The subrecipient is you, the applicant, if you are selected. And I would just reiterate that the subaward agreement is the instrument given by the pass-through entity to the subrecipient, and essentially is just a legal document. All things considered, please just keep in mind that substance over form matters here, which means the substance of a relationship is more important than over the form or the name of the agreement. So now that you have a bit of background on the federal requirements and the roles and responsibilities of the pass-through entity and the subrecipient, we will move on to the budget template. There are some general considerations to keep in mind as you are developing the budget. To begin, the total budget request should be between $20,000 and $700,000. The maximum amount to be requested cannot exceed the FY15 annual operating budget. Cannot exceed 40% of your FY15 annual operating budget. Lastly, the maximum period of performance for U.S. organizations will be June 1st, 2017 through December 31st, 2018. And for MENA-based organizations, the maximum period of performance will be July 1st, 2017 through December 31st, 2018. So now I'm going to open the template and we can walk through the different sections of the budget template workbook. So now that we have it open, you can see here that the template itself has two tabs. There's the Budget Template tab and the Travel Detail tab. We'll begin by talking through the Budget Template tab. This worksheet is divided into 4 sections, beginning with a header here at the top, the budget summary here. I'm going to scroll down to the budget detail section, starting in row 43. And then the last section will be the cost share budget details. Give me 1 second. There we go. So anything below this line is going to be cost share for the budget detail section. So I'm going to scroll back up to the top of the page where we can begin talking about the header section. So as you start this budget, you should begin by filling out your organization name, your project period, and the point of contact. Moving towards the budget summary section right here, this section should not be entered into directly. This will automatically populate as you enter into the budget details section. You'll notice that there are 9 budget categories: personnel, staff travel, participant support, equipment, supplies, contractual, subaward, other direct costs, and indirect costs. It isn't necessary for you to use all 9 budget categories. Similarly, you cannot add in additional budget categories. All costs that will be incurred in this award must fall under one of these predetermined budget categories. Moving on to the budget detail section. As you begin entering into the budget detail section, you should only enter into the blue shaded areas. The white shaded areas contain formulas, as you can see there. These formulas and these totals right here are going to pull back into the budget summary page. So again, do not type into the budget summary section, only enter into the budget detail worksheet. So if we can do an example, we'll scroll down to the supply section, and let's just say, for example, we wanted to purchase laptops. In the first cell, which would be the description, you would simply type in laptops. A rate of a laptop could be, for example, $1,000, so you'll type in $1,000. The percentage to be charged to the award could be anything between 5%, 0% to 100%. For this example, we're going to say we are going to charge 100% of this laptop to the award. But for example, if this laptop was to be given to an employee who is only charging 50% of their time to the award, they should only put in 50% here because that person is not fully charging to the award. That being said, we'll move on to the next tab or the next section, which is going to be the unit of measure. The unit of measure will be each because we're buying 1 laptop each, and we're going to buy 3 laptops. And as you can see there, $1,500 is populated in the cell, which required no manual calculation. If you go back up to the top section of the budget summary, we should be able to see the $1,500 populated. And there we are. So here's the $1,500. You'll see that indirect costs have also calculated at a cost of 10%. This is just merely to show you guys that the indirects also calculate automatically. So as you are typing in all of your costs, you want to also ensure that you're properly substantiating all these costs in the budget narrative template, including all relevant information while being as succinct as possible. So now that you guys have an idea of how to fill out the budget details section, we'll move to the travel details tab. The travel detail tab is divided between staff and participant travel, which is a little bit down here. So let me see if I can get us to it. There we go. So as like I said before, it's divided between staff and participant travel. Something I wanted to mention to go back to the budget template tab very quickly though, is that while I said you cannot add in budget categories, you are allowed to add in additional lines as necessary. So we can go here, we can add in a line, we can change that. You'll just want to make sure, however, that the formulas carry over. That's very important. Just make sure the formulas carry over so everything is totaling correctly. Okay, sorry about that. Back to the travel details tab, we will do a quick run through of this. We can do it in participant support. Let's say, for example, we know that we're going to be traveling from Chicago, Illinois, to Washington, D.C. We'll type that there in the details section, and we would appreciate that you can be as detailed as possible. You should try and enter as much information as possible: dates, locations, the purpose of travel, the number of travelers, names if you have them. We would like you to be as descriptive as possible. So I'll pick off here, and I'll type in Washington, D.C. You know, you could just type in the person's name. You can put in the travel date. For example, let's say they're going to travel August 1st of 2017 through August 4th. Let's see, August 4th of 2017. We're going to purchase 3 round-trip tickets at a rate of $500. We will charge 100% of this to the award, and we have 3 travelers. So we can see here that $1,500 has populated, and if we go back to the budget template page, if we go to participant support, we should see $1,500 has populated. You can see that there in the budget detail section. If you scroll back up to the top of the budget summary page, you can see that the $1,500 has also populated here. So that just gives you guys a quick idea of how to enter into the budget details tab, into the travel detail section as well. Also, as you guys are entering travel details, you should be sure to follow the General Services Administration GSA per diem rates for all U.S. travel. For travel outside of the U.S., please refer to the Department of State's foreign per diem rates. The next 2 slides are examples of the search results while using both of these search links. So this slide here shows you what the results are if you were to look up, using the GSA link provided in the previous slide, the per diem rate for Chicago, Illinois in August of 2017. And you can see here that the per diem rate is capped at $192, and the meals and incidental expenses are capped at $74. These are the rates that you should use when entering travel information into the travel details section. Note that when you are traveling on travel days, you only receive 75% of the M&IE rate. The next tab is an example of using the Department of State foreign per diem link. You would want to select your destination country from the drop-down menu. The example here shows Beirut, Lebanon, and you can see that the lodging is capped at $135, and meals and incidental expenses is capped at $75. Again, these are the rates that you should use when entering for foreign travel, for example, for Beirut, Lebanon. Again, noting travel days, you only receive 75% of the M&I of the meals and incidental expenses. So I'd like to highlight a few additional federal compliance requirements you should keep in mind as you complete the budget. Participant support is defined as a direct cost for items such as stipends, travel allowances, and registration fees paid to or on behalf of participants or trainees, but not employees, in connection with conferences or training projects. Note that you may not reallocate any funds from this line without prior approval. Deciding if something should be considered equipment and supplies is relatively easy. Equipment is defined as having a unit cost greater than $5,000 and a useful life of more than 1 year. If the item meets this requirement, then all federal procurement policies must be followed. We'll talk a little bit more about federal procurement policies in just a moment. If the item does not meet this criteria, the item is considered a supply. Generally, the Stevens Initiative Award does not support the purchase of equipment. So we talked in the earlier slides about the termination between a subrecipient and a contract, focusing more on subrecipient. If, however, it is determined that a contract is needed, the following general guidelines should be followed. These are very general. If the contract is less than $3,000, no quotations are needed. Between $3,000 and $150,000, the current simplified acquisition threshold is $150,000. You must receive adequate number of quotes. Adequate can be determined by your entity. A contract greater than $150,000 must be competitively bid. So the following slides displays the federal procurement clause and can be helpful to print out and keep by your side for reference. We've discussed 3 of the 5 procurement methods, so I'll talk briefly about the standards for procurement. The standards of procurement are that the organization must maintain written policies and procedures over procurement that meet the following standards and any other applicable laws and regulations. Costs incurred must be necessary and cost-effective. All procurement transactions must provide full and open competition. The organization must maintain written standards of conduct covering conflicts of interest. And lastly, the organization must maintain documentation addressing cost and price analysis and vendor selection as applicable for selected methods of procurement. Moving from procurement onto disallowed costs. Disallowed costs are defined as charges to a federal award that the federal awarding agency or pass-through entity determines to be unallowable in accordance with applicable federal statutes, regulations, or the terms and conditions of the federal award. There are 7 general tests of allowability that must be met in order for a cost to be determined as allowable. If it does not meet one of these tests as stated in the uniform guidance, the cost should be deemed unallowable. I've summarized them here for you, and as you can see, the cost must be necessary, reasonable, and allocable. It must be consistently treated within the organization and consistent with the non-federal entities, policies, and procedures. It must not be charged to another federal award, and it must be adequately documented. Again, this is a quick summary. I encourage you to read sections 2 CFR 200.403 of the uniform guidance. The next slide is just examples of disallowed costs. I'd like to highlight that the use of federal funds to purchase alcohol is explicitly prohibited. Entertainment costs are prohibited as well unless there is a programmatic purpose. Please see section 2 CFR 200.438 for additional information on entertainment costs. Also to note, generally other than coach fare is disallowed as well. Note that this is not a comprehensive list, merely examples of some disallowed costs. This slide provides examples of allowable costs. You'll notice that communication costs for videography and photography are allowable, along with monitoring and evaluation costs. Again, this is not a comprehensive list. This slide is merely providing some examples. Remember to refer back to the 7 general tests of allowability when determining if a cost is allowable or unallowable. So we've essentially covered all direct costs up until this slide. The next 2 slides are going to cover indirect costs. In reviewing the LOI in full application form, you might have seen reference to a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement, a NICRA, What exactly is a NICRA? This is an approved indirect cost rate negotiated between the entity, you, and the U.S. federal government. If you do not have a NICRA, there are a few options available to you. Option number one is that you may choose to negotiate a rate with your cognizant federal agency. Note that this is a time-consuming process that requires your entity to have a direct relationship with the federal awarding agency. This rate must be approved at the submission of the budget and full application. Option two, you may elect the 10% de minimis rate. We'll talk more about this rate in the next slide. Option three, you may elect to not collect on indirect costs. The final option would be to negotiate a rate other than the de minimis rate with the Aspen Institute Stevens Initiative. Note, however, that the Aspen Institute Stevens Initiative is not required to give you a rate that is higher than the de minimis rate of 10%. Similarly, as the pass-through entity, this Aspen Institute Stevens Initiative cannot require you to take a rate that is less than the de minimis rate or less than your NICRA rate. Let's talk more in depth about the de minimis rate in the next slide. The de minimis rate was instituted by the Office of Management and Budget, OMB, to relieve administrative burden and to allow non-federal entities, nonprofits, the ability to recover on indirect costs. Many nonprofits are not the direct recipient of federal funds and therefore do not have the opportunity to receive a NICRA. The de minimis rate allows these non-federal entities the ability to automatically collect a 10% indirect cost rate. The indirect cost rate is charged at a base of modified total direct cost. By definition, the modified total direct cost base includes all direct salaries and wages, applicable fringe benefits, materials and supplies, services, travel, and up to the first $25,000 of each subaward, regardless of the period of performance of the subaward under the award. Modified total direct cost excludes equipment, capital expenditures, charges for patient care, rental costs, tuition remission, scholarships, and fellowships, additionally excluding participant support costs and the portion of each subaward in excess of $25,000. It is important to understand the modified total direct cost base and ensure the proper internal controls are in place used to calculate this indirect cost. Note that indirect costs recovered from a federal award are also subject to audit. If the 10% de minimis rate is elected, it can be used indefinitely or until the entity chooses to negotiate a rate. Something important to keep in mind is that the entity can only elect the de minimis rate if the entity has never received a negotiated indirect cost rate agreement before. We've now discussed all sections of the budget except for cost share. Cost share is the portion of the total project cost related to a sponsored program that is not provided by the sponsor. However, encouraged, cost sharing is voluntary and not expected in this award. If the entity decides to contribute costs, only charges that would be allowable as direct costs on this award are allowable as cost sharing. I want to highlight that other federal funds may not be used to meet cost share obligations. The cost share commitment will be written into the subaward agreement, and if you are unable to meet this obligation, you will receive a reduction in your sponsored award. With prior approval, however, unrecovered indirect costs may be included as part of cost share. So now that we've discussed the budget, I'll give you a very brief summary of what to expect post-award in terms of reporting and invoicing. Generally speaking, quarterly financial and programmatic reporting will be expected. Additional reporting may be required based on a risk assessment of you as a subrecipient. You will not be required to submit actual receipts to us, as we only request a copy of your general ledger. However, periodic sample testing may be performed, and you could be asked to produce actual receipts. Please keep these items in mind as you're developing the project and budget and assigning tasks to staff and others. So that concludes our webinar. We will now open it up for Q&A. I encourage you to type your questions in the question box, and we will answer your questions there. Thank you.
Okay. I am going to start with the questions that are coming in. I will read them out loud, and Christine will answer them. The first question is, for how many years do you need the reporting for?
Your reporting will be required throughout the period of performance. So if you are awarded for 18 months, you will report to us for 18 months.
Another question, where can we find a copy of the budget template?
The budget template was uploaded into Fluid Review and should be downloadable for you in Excel. Also, to note, it should be completed in Excel, not manually filled out and returned back to us.
Another question, we only have 2 years of auditing on hand, but the application requires 3. What should we do?
I would suggest that you turn in the 2 years of your audited financials, and if we can clarify later on whether or not you are a new organization, but if you are not a new organization, for the 3rd year, if you can provide just audited financial statements that you do internally, that should suffice as well.
A question from Francis. One of our host country program partners may contribute iPads for students. Can we include those costs in the cost share section?
If your partner is not a federal awarding agency, yes, they can be included as part of cost share, assuming that these iPads are not included on cost share on a different project already.
So another question here, do subrecipients from the Middle East need to have a negotiated overhead rate from the U.S. government?
No, that is not necessary. You are eligible to collect the 10% de minimis rate on modified total direct costs. That is assuming that you've never received a negotiated indirect cost rate from the U.S. federal government.
Another incoming question here by email. Since the Aspen Institute is a pass-through entity, who is the prime sponsor?
Our prime sponsor is the Department of State.
Thank you. In defining participants, can you clarify if this should be solely students or if faculty would be included as well?
You know, it's a very good question. It depends on the nature of your program. At some point, educators may actually be considered participants, as they are definitely not staff members, but it depends on the structure of your organization and the structure of your program. So if you want to, when you get to that question in the actual budget application phase, if you want to reach out to us, we can give you more information then.
We have a question from Denise. Can compensation be provided to partner institutions or faculty in a foreign country?
Yes.
For budget details, if the names and or positions of staff or traveler changes due to staff rotation, does that affect the grant?
It does not affect the grant. We just ask that you keep us apprised of those types of changes and feed that information to us as soon as you know those changes happen.
There's a question here to go back to the section on covering employee salaries. Amy, if you have a more specific follow-up question on that, we may be able to help you. I'm not sure if you were looking for general guidance on that. So please do follow up with that and we'll happily address it. Sammy is asking how long the proposal should be. Semi, if you go on Fluid Review, you will be able to see all the questions and to preview them before you submit. Henry may have something to add.
Yeah, this is Henry Shepard, also working on the Stevens Initiative, and I just add that the Fluid Review website, which is at aspen.fluidreview.com, is where you can see a series of short answer and medium answer question prompts. The word limits usually are either 100 words or 300 words. So there's no overall length limit for the form. It's just a matter of how much writing you feel is appropriate to do to answer a series of questions that are on aspen.fluidreview.com that you'll see when you log in to the same place that you submitted the letter of interest form. Thanks very much, and do follow up by email if you have more questions about the application form.
Thank you. A question from Claire. What difference margin can we have between the amount indicated in the letter of interest and the final budget?
To be totally honest, we don't have an actual percentage or amount for you. I would say it would be good to say it as near as possible as to the budget that was submitted in the LOI. But for any drastic differences, you would obviously have to justify that and explain why there was a deviation from the original budget.
Abby is asking if there is a 10% leeway up or down on budget lines from proposed versus actual with asking for an amendment.
Yeah, absolutely. The 10% rule applies here as well, 10% on your total budget. So you are free to move within line as long as it does not go over the 10% of your total budget.
What is the distinction between year 1 and year 2 in the budget? Do those align with calendar years, i.e. 2017 and 2018?
It's a great question. Year 1 is going to align with the calendar year. So whether your period of performance starts in November or in June, the end of year 1 will be the end of 12/31/2017.
Would our partners receive a sub-award from us or a contract?
It's a very good question. You will need to make that determination, and we're here to help you as well. But I would refer to the beginning slides where you can read through the determinations between a sub-award and a contractor. It depends on the type of work that will be completed, and we can go from there.
Question on cost share here. Is there a specific cash match or in-kind match percentage requirement?
There is no percentage required for cost share or any matching. This is voluntary.
We have another question here related to one we received earlier, if it's allowable to increase our total budget from the amount we listed in the letter of interest. I believe Christine's answer, do you have anything to add to that, Christine?
I don't have anything to add to that. Any deviations from your original LOI budget should be explained, but we would encourage you to stay as in line with the original budget as possible.
We have a question from Meredith. Can you confirm there is a template for the timeline? If so, where is it available for download?
This is Henry again, and I can speak to that. There was a delay in our making the timeline template available, but you should now see it available as a link inside the timeline template submission area. And I'll be happy to follow up by email to make sure that you have it specifically.
I see a question about the decision-making timeline, which we will come back to later. For now, just to continue with these questions, do contractors need to have a negotiated rate?
No, contractors do not need to have a negotiated rate.
If performance period starts in June, can you let us know when we would know whether the project will be awarded? Okay, this is a good time to address it, I guess. Henry, would you like to take that one?
Sure. The deadline for submission of the full application for U.S.-based organizations is in late March, and we will be going through a very careful review committee process followed by vetting by our partner organizations, and we will we'll make every effort to conclude the vetting and negotiation process in advance of the period of performance. So you can expect, I think, if an award is being offered, to be discussing that with us in late April and early May.
I see a question here. Is cost incurred during the preparation for the grant allowable to be included in the budget? I.e., if we pay consultants to help with development of curriculum draft, would we be able to later include this cost as expense?
No, this would be an unallowable cost, but thank you for the question.
Can you please confirm that the application form is just 25 questions?
This is Henry again. Megan, I haven't actually numbered and counted the questions. Some of them are quite short answers. So there's a table where it lists all of the countries and all of the, a checkbox for all of the states, a few other fill in the blanks, some short questions about the biographical information of key staff members. So it kind of would depend how you count, whether you count some of those as sections or questions. I believe it goes on to 7 pages of the Fluid Review website. And if you have any more detailed questions about whether you're seeing all of the fields or whether you might be missing something, please do follow up with us by email. I would point out that in addition to the application form itself, there are also slots for several mandatory uploads, such as the budget narrative, project timeline, and so forth, as well as several optional upload buttons, such as for CVs and resumes for staff, which we can assume that all organizations should be listing, as well as for the NICRA, proof of NICRA, and a few other things too. So please do be attentive not only to the form, but also to all of the upload slots that may be relevant to your proposal.
Question from Aaron here. Can you clarify at what point domestic and foreign program delivery partners are required to complete the subrecipient form? When are they contractors versus subsets?
So I think a follow-up question that would be, when you refer to the subrecipient form, are you referring to the form that was uploaded into Fluid Review? If that's the case, that is the form that should be completed by you as the entity, not by your partners.
Okay, thank you. What kind of documentation of the status of the partnerships are you looking for?
This is a very good question. At this stage, if there are memoranda of understanding or letters of commitment or letters of interest, we are interested in being able to pass along those to our review committee to help the applying organization substantiate the degree of preparation for the work that's being proposed. So it's not required at this stage that it be a formal agreement or any sort of legally binding document, but material that's shared would help give our committee a sense of how well formed and how well established such partnerships are.
Eileen's question is whether staff timekeeping requirements apply to awards.
All employees who will be charging time to this award must keep timesheets. This is in accordance with federal T&E timekeeping rules, so you must keep federal timesheets.
Question from Carolyn, what's the difference between a trainer and employee in the delivery of a program?
A trainer is someone that you can be paying externally. An employee is someone who is in-house. So they might carry the name of a trainer, but they're not external partners. They are an internal person who has the title of a trainer. I hope that answers the question.
Questions about subrecipients here. If we have a partner, will they be considered a subrecipient to us or to Stevens? If so, would we have to have a competitive bid?
Subrecipients do not necessarily require a competitive bid, but you should keep on your procurement hat when thinking about the best person to award a subaward to, just like this is a competitively based merit process. They would be considered a subrecipient to you and would also be considered a subrecipient to us. They are essentially a lower tiered subrecipient.
Thank you. Our institution has an established NICRA. Our central office requires us to exempt participant support costs from the indirect cost rate. How can we best calculate this on the budget template?
We can work together to do that. You can give it your best shot if you like and calculate it on your own, or you can just give me a call and we can work through it together. Either way works.
I see a question here about how many awards are being given this year.
We don't have a predetermined number of awards being given this year. It will be based on the recommendation of the review committee on the quality of each proposal. as well as on agreement with our partnering and supporting organizations to determine the exact number. But we anticipate it being less than half, considerably less than half the number of organizations that have been invited to submit full applications.
I see a question from Denise, proposing a project that will include the university in Iraq. We will seek to meet with the faculty and students in a third country. This will entail travel and visas for our partners in Iraq. Is this allowable?
Yes, the answer is yes, generally yes.
Another question from Angela here. The application requires a recent program evaluation. Is this only for organizations who ran a 2015 Stevens program, or could we submit evaluations of other programs we ran in 2015?
Thanks very much for the question. It's not specific to those organizations that have received a Stevens Initiative Award in the past. This is just a place where an organization that has a report from a recent program evaluation from a relevant program can upload any report or material that they feel they'd like to share with the review committee that would provide more insight and sort of back up claims about an organization's track record on evaluation. So it does not need to be from past Stevens Initiative work. It just needs to be from relevant work.
Carolyn, we did address your question earlier. If you have any further questions, please do follow up. Question from Sammy, apart from the budget, what's the number of words which the proposal must include?
The word limits apply on a per question basis. Some of them are simple one-line answers, or some of them are simple number answers, such as the number of young people who will participate in the program in each possible country. Some are short answer questions where there's a 100-word limit. Some are longer answer questions where there's a 300-word limit. Some of them actually have no word limit because the amount of information being sought, for example, about partnerships or about evaluation, it could go beyond a simple word limit. You can see the word limit in an uploaded PDF version of the application form that we shared on the main competition information page at aspen.fluidreview.com. You can also see the word limit by clicking in the text entry box for every question. When you click inside the box, a number will display telling you how many words you have left to write for that question. To be very clear, you do not need to reach the word limit for any question. You can write less than the word limit, but you cannot go over the word limit, and there will be no penalty for writing shorter than the limit.
Question from Susan. When do you expect to notify applicants if they have received an award? If the grant period can begin June 1st, does that mean we will already be notified of a grant award prior to June 1st?
Yes, that is certainly the plan, for sure.
Regarding evaluation, what if our program has not been evaluated by an external evaluator? What are examples of appropriate documentation of outcomes from our work to date?
Carrie, we provide a slot to allow an upload of a document related to evaluation only if it's applicable to the organization in question. If there's no such report or no such documentation of past evaluation work, it is not required to upload anything. It's just a chance for you to provide whatever you might have. And we leave it to your discretion to decide if something might be relevant. So it need not be a formal published report. It could be any information that you feel is helpful to the review committee. In all cases, whether we're talking about this document or any others, we do ask that you be sharing material that is as concise as possible.
So, question from Amy: can the grant be used to pay teachers' salaries at refugee locations?
At refugee. I think it depends who these teachers are employed by. If they're already employed by the federal government or used or have salaries paid by federal dollars, the answer would be no. It's a possibility that perhaps a stipend could be given to them, but again, I think it depends on the nature of their relationship with their organization and what's allowable on their end.
Thank you. Erin, quickly answering your question, there is no specific format. Carrie, you have a follow-up question on evaluation. What are your hopes and expectations around research methods or approaches to assessing learning outcomes, quantitative versus qualitative measures preferred?
Carrie, thanks. We welcome a variety of approaches to evaluation, and we look to the organization proposing the program to indicate what sort of evaluation they feel is most appropriate for their work. As Mason said in her opening comments, we have a few core aspects of programming and a few core intended outcomes related to global competencies that are central and important to our work, and we do encourage you to look at the global competence framework that we shared from the Department of Education. We know that programs will have a variety of other intended outcomes and goals that are specific to their program design. And there are a few core elements that are shared from us by the Department of State that I believe we share in our guidelines and sort of parameters, such as participant satisfaction and the effect of the program on the institution that is carrying out the program. So you can see more information about those in the Fluid Review page that gives the sort of competition overall guidelines, again, at aspen.fluidreview.com.
We have a question here that I saw a few times, again from Carrie. How many applicants are in the full proposal phase?
As is our custom, we're not sharing the exact number of total organizations that have been invited to submit a full application. But as I mentioned before, this is a very competitive process. We narrowed the pool down considerably from the letter of interest stage to this stage, and we anticipate offering awards to considerably less than half the number of organizations that have been invited to submit a full application.
Another question for you, Henry. Will we need to provide letters of commitment for our partner organizations in MENA? If so, where should these be uploaded in the online application?
Thanks for the question. There is a slot to upload letters of commitment, memoranda of understanding, or other material that substantiate that an organization has partners, either partners in the United States or for organizations based in the Middle East and North Africa, partners in elsewhere in the Middle East and North Africa, or really anywhere, any partnership, whether it's for implementing a program, for technology, for evaluation, any sort of collaboration with another entity can be included in such an upload. There's one slot for uploading these materials, and I think what that would mean is that if there were multiple organizations that you were partnering with and you had letters of commitment or letters of interest from multiple such organizations, that we ask that you bundle them together as a PDF and upload them. There is a slot in the application form for such letters. I don't remember the exact phrasing of the slot, but it should be pretty self-explanatory. I think it's in the second half of the list of upload slots.
Mu'tasim, we see your question, and we will follow up with you by email. We have a question from Chelsea for Christine. I think I heard you mention some special considerations for new organizations, for example, one that might not have 3 years of audited financials. Can you expand on these considerations for new organizations?
Thank you. It's a great question, and you are correct in hearing that there are some special considerations for new or startup organizations. We would love to see 3 years of audited financial statements externally audited. If, however, you don't have that, we could accept a year of internally audited financial statements and 2 years of externally audited, or some mix there, some mix of something like that. But anything else that you have more specific to this, you can definitely send us an email and we can talk more about this offline.
Question from Alexandra here on how many CVs you should upload. There isn't a fixed number of CVs that you should upload. It really depends. Usually we see CVs come in for key staff or staff with expertise that is very relevant to your program. So we will leave that up to you.
We also know that not all staff positions for a project like this have been identified well in advance, especially for some of the lower level positions. So it's not required that all staff be known at this time. It's not required that they remain fixed, so that a CV may be included or a position may be envisioned for a particular person. And we understand that these plans change. And as Christine said earlier, that's the kind of thing, whether it's a senior staff member or a more junior staff member that might be listed, we expect to be updated and kept apprised of that information. But but it is something that is open to change. This is not the earliest information you share with us does not need to remain exactly as it is if the situation changes.
Question from Meredith, is there an expectation that we attach the full curriculum to our submission?
Meredith, you may attach a curriculum to the submission, and we believe that that kind of information, which we've called for, and there's a specific button for curriculum in the upload section, we believe this would be very helpful to our review committee, whether it's the full curriculum or an outline of a curriculum being developed or some illustrative materials extracted from a long curriculum. And any of that would be very helpful to the review committee, but we understand that for many organizations, they're still refining a curriculum from a similar program or still developing it. So this is not a strict requirement. As much information that you have that you can share succinctly with the review committee would be very welcome.
Question from Sammy here. Do you need any documents to be submitted with the application form apart from CVs?
Thanks. This is a good question. Yes, we do have slots for several uploads. As we've seen a few questions here, we do have a slot for CVs and resumes. We have a slot for uploading information about the curriculum. There's a slot for uploading proof of an indirect cost rate, recent annual reports, I believe, the budget narrative, program timeline. Some of these are required in the forms. Some of them are just there for you to share information if it's available. We realize this is quite a bit of information and it will take considerable time for organizations to pull it together, but we think it's very much in the service of giving our external review committee the information they need to make an informed recommendation about an award.
Is there a full application template? Question from Anne.
There is a form to be filled out at aspen.fluidreview.com, and if you go to the guidelines page, you can download a PDF that shows you all of the questions in the sort of fill-in-the-blank form that we've asked organizations to fill out. You need to fill it out in the online form, however. You cannot fill it out in the PDF document itself. So there's this multi-page online form with fill-in-the-blank answers, short answer questions of up to 100 words, medium answer questions of up to 300 words, and a few other slots to add more information. And in addition to that form, there are these upload buttons where we ask organizations to share some mandatory uploaded material as well as some voluntary uploaded material. And together, the uploads and the form constitute the full application.
I see a few more questions here, and I recognize we are at the end of our session today. So we will be sure to follow up with you by email for those who sent in questions. Thank you for putting your email addresses as well. And if you have any more questions, as we said, please be sure to reach out to us. The email is stevensinitiative@aspeninstitute.org. Thank you all for joining us. As we mentioned, we will make this recording and the slides available on our website, www.stevensinitiative.org. A reminder, the deadline for organizations based in the U.S. is March 30th. For organizations based in the Middle East and North Africa, the deadline for applying is April 13th. For more information on the competition, priorities, or other information about the initiative in general, please go to our website or to www.aspen.fluidreview.com. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today.